Hey everyone, I'm Jen Zabasaja, Bloomberg QuickTake in New York.
And I'm Lucas Shaw, entertainment and media reporter for Bloomberg News in Los Angeles.
Thank you all for joining us so much. We're really excited about this conversation that we're about to have today, which we're hoping is the start of a series of conversations that we have around how each industry is rebuilding. And we wanted to start today, as you could have seen with our animation, with entertainment, because it's something that we all need right now. And we just wanted to dive into what the entertainment industry looks like going forward. So I'm really grateful that we have Lucas here with us today, and also the next three guests with us.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be speaking with the guests we're about to have. We're starting with manager, producer, lawyer, and founder of Cinetic Media, John Sloss. We also have award-winning actor and philanthropist, Jeffrey Wright. And then one of the busiest directors in TV today, Salli, Richardson, Whitfield. I wanted to start, Jeffrey, I believe that you were in the middle of filming what would have been, undoubtedly one of the biggest movies of next year, which is Matt Reeves' Batman film, when this all happened. And I'm wondering, at what point in the production you started to realize that you'd be taking a break, or how that sort of set in on the set? And then also, at that time, how long you thought you'd be sitting at home, and how that's compared with what's actually happened?
Well, I started kind of asking questions of one of the producers while we were on set, whether or not he thought we were going to get shut down only about 2 weeks before we ultimately did, which was March 13th. But I had been tracking this thing pretty steadily since the middle of January, after I realized that Wuhan was a city of 11 million people and not like some town out in the middle of nowhere. 11 million people, transportation hub, and the early news we got was that this transmitted more or less like common cold, respiratory, which to some extent remains true, the statistics aside. So I was tracking it pretty consistently, and we made a decision pretty much on the fly, as most did. What happened in our case, March 13th, I came home after filming in London, watched the press conference from the Rose Garden in which the various CEOs of, the pharmacies were paraded out as though they were healthcare heroes. And immediately after that press conference, I booked my own flight home, because the UK at that point was not on the restricted travel basis. The rest of Europe, or many parts of Europe, were, and it seemed completely arbitrary. It was, in fact, and so it prompted a question from someone in the press. So at that point, when it seemed that the jig was up on that, I just booked my flight. And basically, I think to some extent what we were doing was trying to make decisions based off the absence of information that we were receiving, as opposed to the direct information that we were receiving. So I began to have exchanges with the producer. Warner Brothers was already having conversations about what we were to do, because we were planning on going to Liverpool the following week. Crowd scenes of over 600 people, which would not have been permissible in New York at that time, and clearly did not seem to be permissible for too much longer in the UK. So I came home 2 days later on the first flight home that Sunday, playing Dobbs the Pathogen. So, from our perspective, we were really on the ground, kind of making it up as we went along, which certainly will change now going forward. We were put on 2 week hiatus at that point, came back home, and then subsequent to that, we were put on indefinite hiatus, I think, under force majeure. So what needs to happen now is the unknowns need to be determined, and that's going to be a problem because those unknowns are going to remain so for some time. So, the question will be, when can a production get bonded again? When can we safely go back to work again? And I'm not sure exactly when that is, but that's a function of what we're all doing, is how much information we have access to, how do we process it, and how do we use it to make decisions about working together safely.
Mm-hmm. And Salli, you were also abroad as well when this was happening, correct?
Yeah, I was in Prague shooting a show for Amazon, and things that happened for us pretty quickly. Like Jeffrey, I kind of was watching things there, and our show really got on top of it pretty quickly. Like within 1 week, the next day I came to work, and you couldn't serve yourself food anymore. They had masks. They were really, but they hadn't shut us down yet. And then on Wednesday, somewhere around then, when they shut US down, and then we got a little nervous. And then by Thursday, we realized that Prague was going to shut down, and they were like, you really got to get out of here by Sunday. And I was like, I was supposed to be done anyway, but I stayed because I wanted to finish my episode. And by Friday night, I'm checking flights, and my flights are starting to get canceled through Amsterdam. And so now then I get another flight that gets canceled. I get there Saturday morning, flight canceled to Amsterdam. And I think I'd used some acting and cried there, and I was like, you've got to get me out of here. But I think that, I was supposed to go to New York from there to start a new show. And it's going to be, I don't even know how they're going to do it. Same thing, big set pieces, lots of extras. And I think that once we do figure out what the protocols are going to be, it's going to be really about reimagining a lot of these scenes. Shows that didn't use a lot of visual effects may have to consider adding in people like that to still open up your show. I don't see what it's going to be yet, honestly.
You both just talked about all the uncertainty right now. At the same time, we have politicians who are already agitating for society to reopen, certain countries where production has resumed again, certain states where they're talking about reopening. I'm wondering for any of you, would you feel comfortable going into production on something in the next couple of weeks?
No.
Yeah.
And I'm not going back to work until I feel that I'll be safe. Period.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think any insurance or bond companies are thinking the same. But certainly from a personal perspective, that's where I am.
Well, and I think the actors are the most in jeopardy. I can be on the set and have a mask and gloves and cover and stay distance away, and the crew can do that a bit. But even once there are protocols for the actors, you're really going to have trust in the actor that you're working with, that they're being responsible. And that would be my most of my concern for the actors, because they can't have a mask on while you're shooting.
John, what are some of the things that you guys are discussing for projects either that you're producing or that the people you work with are trying to get financed?
Well, I think it goes without saying that insurance and bonds are going to be sort of out of the question for the foreseeable future. I think the larger corporations who self-insure, the Netflix, the Amazons, the studios very possibly may make a decision from that perspective of whether they are willing to take the risk of being interrupted or having to shut down. I think there's an essential component here also, which is going to be getting support from governmental entities to basically give you protection from liability if you follow certain safety protocols and someone still gets sick or brings a suit. You need to be protected from that kind of liability. Whether this is realistic or not, I have no idea. It seems to me, if you're really going to sort of dissect this and do it step by step, you're not going to be able to shift risk onto bonds and insurance companies for the foreseeable future. I do a lot of documentary stuff. Obviously the focus is going to be on archival. I think there's a sense that certain small shoots where you've got a director, a sound person, and a camera person, and a subject, there's a way possibly to do that. By being prudent. And I think a lot of the beneficiaries are going to be the visual effects companies, as Salli said, just sort of filling out the frame. I think there's going to be obviously more and more and more of that.
And you mentioned sort of feeling safe, Salli, Jeffrey, you sort of touched on this. We're seeing some European countries start to open up, and they're sort of outlining their own guidelines for, COVID-19 safety guidelines on set. I wonder if either of you have heard about any of this, and if that would make you feel any more comfortable going back to London or to Prague to shoot again. Like, what is it going to take for you to feel comfortable again?
Well, I mean, I've really heard so many different rumors. One of the shows I'm supposed to go to, they're talking about for, people coming there 2 weeks ahead of time, being quarantined, making sure that, putting the whole crew in one hotel, and you kind of go to work and go back to your hotel, separating actors and directors in homes, basically going from work to that home. I don't know if that's what happens with the day players, what happens. It makes sense, but like I said, I really think that Jeffrey's going to be the one. Jeffrey, how do you feel? Would that make you feel safer?
I think that, John, there's an additional consideration too, Salli, and that it's not solely about someone bringing a lawsuit against you. It's about their estate bringing a lawsuit against you. It's about someone dying, which we did have on the set of Batman, not on the set, forgive me, not to misspeak, but a guy who was a dialect coach on Batman, subsequent to our shutting down, passed away from COVID, right? So you have people who are more vulnerable than others due to comorbidities and various things. And for them, it's not just a question of the production being shut down again. It's a question of life and death. Yeah. Like, and to your point, Salli, Batman wears a cowl, but the mask doesn't, Robert did the mask doesn't go down so far, So we're going to be exposed. I think the thing that's going to make us feel safe is the thing that's going to make everyone in any society feel safe, and that is the access to quickly responsive testing, right? So there's got to be an awareness of what the state of health is for any one individual who's on the set. We were doing all the things as you described, Salli, too. No more big pots of food at craft services, and washing your hands before entering the cafeteria space and all of that. But still, the thing can creep in there. We were doing a scene that last day that we shot. We were inside a small room, 30 people packed in there. Hey, I was spraying everybody, I'm in there doing whatever I'm doing. And if I had that thing, man, it was not going to be a good story. So regardless of what we do, if we're not aware of whether or not we're infectious, then, it's a done deal. End of story. And nobody will be safe under those conditions.
But that's what I'm saying. It's really down to it's going to be easier to protect the crew and people behind the scenes, but the testing is really going to be important for the actors. And then you're going to have to trust your other actors that they're going to be responsible when they leave, and that people aren't being silly and going out to bars and doing stuff, like while you're shooting. It really has to be a lockdown for those actors. I think that is going to be one of the most important things that has to happen.
Don't go to what?
No bars for you.
That's why I think my favorite part of acting is the,
You guys are all going to have to bond together. You go to one house and you can party there, and then you go back to the set. That's all you get to do.
My favorite part is when the camera rolls and the glass of wine after. I mean,
that's mine.
Everything else.
To that, I mean, there have been discussions of circumstances where you have everybody in one place, or you stay in a hotel quarantine. I mean, Does that seem feasible with a major production, though? To your point about testing, Jeffrey, could you tell the entire set around Batman or with Gilded Age Salli that you're going to all stay in this one place and you're not going to interact with other people, or do you have to get to the point where everybody feels comfortable living their regular lives to a degree for that a project of that scale to get up and running?
I think the main actors, I would think, who have to be near each other all the time need to be in some sort of quarantine thing. Because maybe the day players, stuff like that, just can never get that close. But for your everyday people, unless you guys really trust each other, I think that is going to be a problem.
I mean, there's no question that this is going to be incremental. It's going to start, I think, with smaller productions in more isolated places. There's an interesting article I read today about a production that's proceeding in Iceland and methods that they're doing to sort of keep people separate in different departments with coded armbands. And, the second people are tested repeatedly, there were 2 people who tested positive. They were removed immediately from the location, and no one else has tested positive. I mean, it seems to me that there's not going to be any magic bullet solution here, that it's really going to be incrementally like that.
So then what happens if your lead actor tests positive? Then,
well, that's why we have to, I mean, I know it sounds awful to say, but you guys are the ones we have to protect the most. And that's why you need to be on lockdown, and because you can't have a mask on. So you're going to have to be able to trust your actors and be quarantined, I would think.
Yeah, basically, as we were filming maybe a couple of weeks prior to shutting down, we were all staying in one location anyway. We were well outside London, so most of us were holed up in one hotel. I mean, so there's a way that you can shape, the kind of the collective behavior and collective movement, but and it's a little difficult to ask people understood why we're doing this, to go beyond the given restrictions of a jurisdiction. But understood, we have to make exceptions because we've got a responsibility to the production. But any of this without access to the quick response testing
doesn't mean anything.
It means nothing. So we really have to, I mean, we can't take we can't make up guidance on our own. The guidance has to come from, government at large in any, in the country in which we're working, and the availability of the science to back up our decision making.
But it's amazing. Right now, I'm on calls all day and meet in Zoom meetings because everything is pushing ahead, like things are about to go into production, and and that's how people are, pretending, I guess. But I keep going, okay, I'm glad we're having these meetings. We're in our pre-production, all this, but I don't know what that really means. There is no solid date of when anything can start.
Yeah, that's what we actually wanted to ask you guys, that, like, how involved have you been in some of the discussions about upcoming productions, and whether you're voicing sort of what you're telling us to the Hollywood executive, to the studios? Are you feeling like you have been able to express that to them, express your concerns with them?
Well, everyone has the same concern. Mostly what we've been discussing are how to reimagine certain scenes that have big crowds. How do we rewrite? How do we, instead of doing this scene in a big stadium, how do we put it outside and cover a lot of it and sort of fake the scope of the scene, and then get in there and do a smaller scene with the people, And so how do we rewrite these scenes that had a lot of people in them? Or how do we reimagine shooting this so it's not a lot of coverage, which I think maybe work out well. It'll be a little more cinematic. You're not doing TV coverage per se, because you don't have time to come in there and do a bunch of different sizes. And so it's really, for me right now as a director, reimagining the scripts that I'm given and how do we shoot it now in this new COVID world.
To your point about,
you have to take into consideration the scale of what you're trying to do, but at the same time, we've got to remember something, that we're in a pandemic, and as much as we want to, get back to work and get the economy going, we are in an historic pandemic. And if you look at the modeling, and if you look at the science, if you're heeding the scientists, they're also saying that there's going to be a second wave, depending on how you shut it down initially, whether you went for the herd immunity mode, or whether it was more gradual, or whether it's something in between. So the experts say expect a second wave in October, November. This, it's based in science. It's not fact, but we got to take that into consideration as well. And not to do that is foolish, dangerous, and counterproductive. Because at the end of the day, we want to get out of this, right? It's not the end of the world. It's not eternal, but we got to take the right steps to get us on the other side. And maybe what that means for productions is, we're going to wait a few months and then we're going to go back to work. If we're going to do what's best for the individuals and also best for the productions and best for the companies behind them in the long run. So, that should not be out of the realm of possibilities in terms of paying attention, serious attention to the science, and not being distracted by the absolute nonsense that is polluting the conversation around how to address this on a national level in the United States of America, certainly. We have failed at the top. Government leadership has failed to take this seriously from the start, failed to respond quickly, failed to follow the science on every occasion. And let's not sit here and pretend that that's not the case. You only need to look at the successes in Taiwan, the successes in South Korea, where the first confirmed case was the same day as ours. The numbers of fatalities are de minimis. These are the facts. So let's not start making decisions based on the obfuscating of the facts. We might have to wait.
Right.
Period.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think that that's why a lot of these meetings, I feel like, are just people getting ready for when we can go. But we're in a vacuum. Nobody knows what's going on. We have no one leading us. And that is the scariest thing about all of this, is that we have absolutely no leadership. I have 2 kids in my home. If I were to go back to work, I wouldn't come back near my family one time. And that's scary. I feel like I'd be putting them at risk. So yeah, Jeffrey, we have no leadership, and nothing can happen that seems good right now.
And it's all being spun. I live with my 90-year-old aunt lives with me now. I'm not playing games with it, period. Yeah. We cannot be making decisions based on the spin and based on the fact that some are being swayed by the spin. And I think that's happening to a large degree now, weirdly. We're almost back to the idea that this is overblown and it's actually a hoax.
Do you think that's happening with something within your own kind of backyard, like studios and theaters? There's the movie theater industry has picked July as sort of the month where theaters are going to reopen in the United States. Does that seem realistic?
I think it'll open. I wouldn't go to the movie theaters.
I mean, I think it's going to be interesting. Obviously, Christopher Nolan is sort of pushing the matter with his film. And I think there are a lot of sort of interesting possibilities at play here, whether if they do open and they do enforce some sort of social distancing that seems responsible, and that the film can then maybe flip to transactional VOD within several weeks if people aren't showing up in theaters, then there might be some model for the future going forward. They're exploring similar situations with film festivals as well for the fall, to whether you program fewer films, you spread people out, you make it available virtually to a conscribed group of people at the same time, and you create a sort of community effect out of that. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. I don't get a sense that the theaters are clamoring to act irresponsibly here. I think everyone's just sort of probing and seeing what seems responsible and trying incrementally to figure it out.
My take on it is there's a lot of attention, a lot of thought being given now to reopening. I'm with that. I've been working on keeping restaurants open here in Brooklyn through this initiative, Brooklyn for Life. We got 50 small business restaurants that have been providing meals to local hospitals and FDNY EMS stations, over 120,000 meals we serve. So I'm not against the idea of being smart, being science-based, and going back to work and keeping business flowing. But I wish that some of those, or that mode of thinking that we're following now about reopening, I wish the intensity of that thinking and the creativity involved in that thinking now were as focused on the communities here in Brooklyn, where we've lost almost 5,000 people now. The hardest hit county in this country is Kings County. And there are some communities here, like out in East New York, where 1 in every 28 people was infected by this thing. Whereas if you go on the Upper East Side or other more affluent neighborhoods where people ducked out to wherever they might have gone, the rates are around 1 out of every 123 people. So I wish we had thought about those folks over there in those communities with the same intensity as we're thinking about reopening, and we might then be reopening earlier if those who seem philosophically wedded to this idea were as intently wedded to the idea of public health, we might be in a better situation. So I'm not really trusting much that comes out of that perspective, frankly, because I don't think it speaks for me. I don't think it speaks for the science, and I don't think it speaks for the overall well-being of our country.
Yeah, and John, I wonder, you're probably having some of these discussions too as a producer. Are these things coming up in the discussions that you are having when you are talking about, starting new projects, new titles? Are they taking the science into account and what we're seeing, or do you recognize that they're maybe just rushing to get open again?
I mean, I think honestly what people are doing is what Salli said, is they're focused on development. They're pushing everything up to a line, and then they realize it's out of their hands at that point. I don't know anyone who's saying, screw it, let's take our chances. And unfortunately, the agenda, I think the people running this country know exactly what they're doing, and what they're doing is more insidious than we're even talking. Yeah. The best thing we can do is focus on getting new leadership in the country. And hopefully what they're doing now will hasten that eventuality. But I think most of the people I know are really focused on getting their stuff ready and just waiting for some clarity as to how to proceed.
And what I'm concerned about when we do go back and we do have our testing is that, there are going to be a lot of jobs lost. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people who rely on being extras who are not going to be back in a long time. There are a lot of directors who, if you're not established now, there's not going to be any shadowing on set. They're not going to bring in a lot of different directors on shows. Crews are going to be cut in half. A lot of people are not going to be able to get back to work. And that's going to be a very big long-term problem for people financially.
I mean, look, I come from a world that's obviously leaner than a lot of sort of, studio, large format productions. But, the problem we're going to have is what we identified earlier, which is we're not going to be able to get insurance. We won't be able to get bonds. We won't be able to get bank financing until there's some protocol in place to enable that. the larger production organizations can insure themselves. Until that's sorted out, the independent film world from a production standpoint is really not viable.
So John, I think you make a really great point. It really is at the end of the day about government leadership. I mean, we can't make decisions in a vacuum. And that, maybe the future of storytelling, for us is doing what we can right now to get leadership in Washington that at least, believes in science. Because otherwise, we're left in the void, making decisions that may or may not be effective and ultimately, may do us harm.
Yeah.
In some of the conversations about how the business will change or look differently, job losses, inability to get financing, how you change your production, all that, I guess 2 questions off that. One, I know it's hard to say at this point, but do you feel like these changes will last beyond the present moment and kind of affect the business of entertainment and Hollywood years into the future, and not just as we deal with this present pandemic? And how do you think some of those business changes might affect storytelling, if at all?
Well, I mean, like I said, I think that for the first few years, it's going to affect it as far as the amount of people they're going to put into scenes and trying to shoot things quicker and, doing things on a smaller scale. But I think, as most things happen, we forget. And in a few years, things will change gradually and we'll get back to these big, huge productions that Jeffrey's doing. Eventually things will get back to something normal again. But I think that for a while we may have smaller films, things that don't require such big set pieces.
The thing I'm frankly most concerned about is when this all is over, I hope people will get back into the habit of going to movie theaters. I don't know. I think that's going to take a concerted effort from a lot of people. I think, the idea of enforcing windows is probably going to be a casualty of this, and I'm very happy about that, because I think exhibitors relying on people having to wait 90 days to see something and having to go to the theater, not because they want to go to the theater, but because they have to. But it's going to take a concerted effort from a lot of different people to get people in the habit of going out in public to see movies again.
I agree, and I agree, Salli, that it's going to take a while to adjust, but we're going to get back to a COVID-free world. That's going to happen. The question is when. We will get back to something that resembles a new normal. And I agree that the impulse to gather around story is a primal one, and we will return to that. I think there are going to be some things that are advantageous that come out of this for small filmmakers, though. For example, Zoom. Where did Zoom come from? Now Zoom is coming for me as lunch, it's like, 3 meals a day of, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and Zoom, in between. So it will be an opportunity to market films in a way that's much less expensive, for smaller films to do press junkets in a way that they weren't able to before. So there's some tools for efficiencies that will, come out of this that will be really exciting, I think, and further democratize storytelling, as it were. And, we can pretend with our small films that we are, the big films that Salli does and stuff like that.
But I agree, it might be a gift. We can get back to really great stories that are more intimate rather than what has been going on in the last, 15, 20 years, where it's only these huge, big budget movies, and we've gotten away from true storytelling. And it might just give us an opportunity to be seeing some, better art out there.
Hey, easy.
I know. You've been force majeure. You're okay.
We've kind of been seeing that, though, for the past few weeks. Like, it's been interesting seeing how all of these actors and actresses and directors are sort of adjusting and, coming up with things on the fly. Jeffrey, I know you did a read, right? A dramatic read on Zoom. I just think that's been pretty interesting. And like you said, Salli, intimate to see people in just a different way.
Well, it's nice, but but in reality, you're not making any money off of that. So, actors, you can't do a film like this. We can't really do a TV show like this, and people can't get paid like this. You can do it. You can have a beautiful Instagram, life, but that's not paying your bills. And actors out here, though people don't understand it, most actors are really struggling out here because they don't make that much a year. What is like 2% of the union is actually, makes enough money to live on. And people, you can't do it like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, if you really think about it, it's going to be a reset from top to bottom, I think, of society. With all these restaurants closing, which restaurants are going to reopen? Are there going to be new cuisines? Is there, there's going to be new opportunities. In my own life, I've discovered, I'm still very busy, and I'm actually working more efficiently than I was when we were all in the office.
Yeah.
And our office lease is up in a year and a half, and I'm now thinking about half the amount of space I was planning to rent. And I think if you really deconstruct all these different businesses and see how they'll come out of this, you'll see dramatic changes, whether it's in storytelling, whether it's how people are watching stories, but in every aspect of society. It's going to be terrifying but fascinating at the same time, I think.
Yeah.
And then I think going back to the government question, right? So if we are losing employment opportunities and the like, then what is government doing to offset those losses? Because the things that we're describing too, these technological efficiencies are a boon right now for certain sectors and certain companies. So really, if maybe we even thought about taxing certain industries in a responsible way, then we could make up or at least begin to bridge a gap through deployment of public funds toward making up for the losses in employment and things like that. I think the one thing that we have to offer as filmmakers and people involved in this business is at least a little bit of creativity that says I don't have to be restricted, by the by the known parameters, but we can think outside those things in a way. And I think it's going to take creativity, not only within our field, but at government level now, to rethink the way things have been, the way we've been doing things, and also to recognize that there's value that can be culled out of this experience, even though it has been catastrophic for families and catastrophic in some ways for our country. There's still lessons to be learned, I think, that can be applied to help us out of this thing. And there are some industries that are doing extraordinarily well, and they have a responsibility, or they should be leveraged toward having a responsibility to make up the gap for those who have suffered the most. I mean, it's an extraordinary time, and it calls for extraordinary measures, and government should be driving those who are resistant to that to pitch in at that level.
Well, we're in trouble if we're waiting for this government to be creative right now. We're in big trouble.
Yeah. We need a set of leaders who aren't self-interested, cynical, and lazy.
Because at the end of the day, we'll either turn a corner here and recognize the mistakes that we've made to get us here, or we'll not, and we'll go back to business as usual. And that will be tragic, but not entirely unexpected.
Nope.
Depending on the leadership.
Yeah.
And just to wrap things up with you guys, you talked about people who are struggling right now. We asked our viewers about some questions that they had for you guys, and I wonder if we can just go around and ask each of you if you have any advice for actors, directors, producers who were just starting out before this pandemic really hit. What would you tell them right now as they're watching all of this happen?
Well, I mean, I think for actors and writers, this is a great time. This is a great time for you because people are engaged on YouTube and Instagram and all these things where you can actually create content yourself. And this is the time that you can do it. People, that's all we're doing is looking at our computers all day and looking at our phone. So now's the time for you to be creative and show people that you're a great writer. You could do something like this and do some sort of reading for people to see your things. So I think that is going to have to be what people are doing right now to show their creativity, and just hold in there and know that eventually we'll open up and your dreams don't have to die.
I think as well is just remembering that you're not alone in this from a psychological perspective, an emotional perspective. You know, everybody I know is getting a sense that everything's, that the dreams are being deferred, and maybe for a while, but I think the understanding that this is a real thing, this is a global pandemic that we are all experiencing, and it's going to require a bit of a pause, just for one's own emotional well-being, to recognize that, you know, this is not isolated to any one individual, but as well to use the time to the extent that you can as creatively as possible. To Salli's point, I think I read somewhere that Shakespeare wrote King Lear while in quarantine from the Black Plague or something like that. So, you know, use your time well. Use your time as wisely as you can, and go off and write King Lear.
But don't make it about COVID, because everyone's doing that and nobody want to see that later.
Right. Yeah. We've seen that movie.
We're done.
Not yet. You know. Yeah.
I guess to add to what's being said, I think if this pandemic shows anything, that the institutions that we thought were so powerful and so indestructible are being shown to be so fragile, and that the most indestructible element of everything we do is creativity and talent. And I think people should take that on board, together with all the technology that Jeffrey was referencing before, with the rise of Zoom and the ability to disintermediate and go directly to your audience or to an audience, and take this time and understand that they don't need permission to create. They just need to sit and create and do it brilliantly. And if they do it brilliantly, then now or when we come out of this, there'll be a platform for that creativity.
All right. Well, look, I want to thank you all so much for doing this. I learned a lot. Hopefully you learned something, or at least enjoyed one another's company. And also thank you for adding another Zoom to your schedule. I talk to people pretty much every day who are tired of staring at cameras or computers. I have the privilege of being able to do a lot of my work just by calling people on the phone. So, but I know it can be tedious.
Thank you.
All good. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, and everyone stay safe.
Thank you.
You
You too.